Welcome back to Shelton Ministries. I'm your host, Ashley Shelton. Whenever God puts a dream in our heart that can only be fulfilled through Him and through His strength. And we see that there's different examples all throughout the Bible of where this happened, as to where this took place. And it's interesting to me to see that God gives us these wonderful, beautiful examples for us to all follow. And it's just through our obedience on being able to achieve these dreams that God does give us. I think about a lot of times, do we miss out on God's best because we simply are afraid to take on what that challenge may entail and everything about it? And, um, you know, we're not, no specific dreams in particular. It can just be all different types of dreams that God will place into your heart. And, it's something that can only be accomplished through Him. And it's something that no money can buy. It's something that um, only He can set the connections up in order for this dream to come about. And that's what's so magnificent about our God, is how He can take a desire that He places in our heart and how He can simply breathe life into that. And think back to the different dreams that God has put into my heart throughout my life. And I'm thankful for those dreams and for the ability that He gave me in those moments to actually achieve those dreams. And many things. And there's maybe a dream that God has actually put on your heart, and something that you may be thinking, God, there's no possible way I can achieve that. But in Philippians 2:13, is a beautiful verse there. It says, "For it is God which worketh in you both to will and to do His good pleasure." And that's there in the King James Version. Um, and God, He is just reminding us that He is there with us. For it is God who works in you both to will and to do for His good pleasure. And God given dreams are usually bigger than any human ability that we have to achieve that dream. And I think one of the clearest signs that God has placed that dream in your heart is you simply, at the moment, do not have the resources in order to accomplish that in your own. And you probably very well may not even have the talent to be able to accomplish that dream. That is where God does His best work, is whenever He simply puts His dream there and He asks you to trust Him and to follow Him on achieving that dream. And I think one of the clearest signs that God does this, and that is whenever He called Moses. Moses, He immediately pointed out what his limitations was. Because Moses there in Exodus 3:11, he says, "Who am I that I should go into Pharaoh?" Pharaoh. And Moses is like, why? He's probably thinking, why didn't you call somebody else? But Moses, he had the calling. He just didn't have the confidence that he was going to be able to accomplish what it was that God was telling him to do. And that dream that God put there in his heart, or that calling, that was actually something that was going to take nothing but the power of God in order for that to happen. And what was God's response to that? In Exodus 3:12, He says, "Certainly I will be with thee." So when God puts a dream in our heart, He certainly will be with us. And sometimes it feels like that we are trying to accomplish that dream all on our own, whenever actually it's God. He's still right there in the middle of it, and He will set up everything in order to make that dream come about. And whenever God does put these type of dreams in your heart, it causes you to depend on God daily, because you know that it's something that you are not going to be able to achieve on your own. That you have to completely surrender and completely follow everything God is telling you to do, and do everything in your ability that God has given you in order to get that dream to come about. And another example would be there with Abraham. Abraham, he was promised a son, and he thought there's no possible way that that is going to happen. But God asked him there in Genesis 18:14. He says, "Is anything too hard for me?" And nothing's too hard for God, because God is the creator of all things. And although it looked like that God had gave that dream to Abraham, and it took many years before that came about, it looked like that maybe God had actually changed his mind on it. But actually what it was God, he was just actually getting the situation and everything prepared in order for that to happen. And you know, whenever God is slow at work, just because he's slow, it does not simply mean that he is saying no to situations. Um, and something about God given dreams, they will teach us patience, it'll teach us obedience, and it will teach us to trust God completely. And whenever you realize that God has put a dream in your heart that cannot be achieved on your own human strength, I don't think there is anything more beautiful than knowing that you are going to have to rely completely on your Creator in order to see this dream to come about. And God, He will not leave you, He will not fail you. And you may struggle with it, but God is there in the midst of it whenever He puts a dream on our heart. And I'm often reminded of something that I was always told whenever I was in a graduate school. And I remember one of my instructors, she would say, "Ashley, if it was easy, then everybody would have this degree." And I often thought about that, and that was actually my motivation there. If it was easy, then everybody would have it. And the dreams that God puts you in your heart, it may be easy for somebody else. They may not have to struggle with it. But whenever you know that God has called you to do something, and you have to completely rely on trust in Him, that is where you meet God, and you get to know Him on a deeper basis than any type of level you could have ever got to know Him before. And God, He is the God of miracles. I am a living, breathing miracle, and God has done so much in my own life. He has brought me through so much that I give Him all the praise and the glory for what He has done. And whenever He called Joseph, whenever He gave Joseph that dream, Joseph did not become ruler overnight. But in each season, God refined him, and He reminded him of what that promise was. And until the Lord fulfills the word and the dream that He has put in our heart, we're not to quit, we're to keep going and don't give up. So if you're in the middle of waiting, just know God has not forgotten you. He is simply preparing you for something that only He can achieve. And with life, there are seasons, and there are seasons within seasons. And whenever God takes you through a season that you have never been in before, you will learn things about God that you would have never learned if it had not been for that moment in that season. And you know, God's power, it is often revealed when we admit to Him that we are weak and that we simply cannot do this on our own. You know, Paul, he learned this whenever God refused to remove that thorn from his flesh. And in 2 Corinthians 12:8, he says, "My grace is sufficient for thee, for my strength is made perfect in weakness." And you know, God did not give you this dream in order for you to accomplish in your own strength. He gave you this dream for you to be able to accomplish only through Him. And you know, once that dream is actually fulfilled, God is going to be the one to get all the glory for it, because you're going to be able to look back and you're going to be able to say, "You took me, someone that was not qualified, someone that did not have the talent, someone that did not have the ability to even know where to begin, and you put this dream there, and look at how God worked all things out, because He says He will work all things out for our good." And to be able to see how that dream actually did come into play, all because we trusted God through it. So if God has put a dream in your heart, just know He has already planned the outcome. And what your job simply is to obey Him. And His job is to fulfill it. And you know, God, He put a dream in my heart here probably, well, it's probably about a year ago. He did. And I kept ignoring that dream for the longest time because I thought, God, there's no possible way that I am actually hearing your voice. There's no possible way that I'm actually hearing what you are calling me to do. I'm just hearing the wrong voice. And it just kept building deeper and deeper into my soul. And here, this past fall, it was finally to the point where I was like, okay, God, I surrender. Now that I have surrendered, I need you to show me how you're going to bring this dream about. And it was I think within 3 days, that God had my path to cross with somebody that I did not know, somebody that is many states away from me, and they are the vessel that God is using in order to bring this dream about that He has placed in my heart. And whenever I look at it, and I'm like, God, you could have not chose a better person than what you have chose. And you know, whenever we trust God completely, He will work all the details out. Now, I can't say that it's an easy process, no, because it's been a huge challenge. And every single day, I have to seek God in prayer for strength to keep building the momentum to get this dream achieved that He has placed in my heart. And it's during those times whenever I start to feel myself go backwards and start to fail, that God will remind me, no, I'm the one that has called you to do this. You can do it. Keep trying. And you know, whenever we meet God halfway, whenever we meet God, God will meet us the rest of the way, is what I was trying to say there. So I do my part, and then God, He takes care of the rest of it. And just each week, just seeing how God is just building on top of everything that He has there placed in that dream, the progress that just keeps building. I'm like, God, that is you. Like, how could it possibly how could this possibly happen? And with God, all things are possible. And so, whatever dream God has placed in your life, trust Him, completely surrender to Him, and tell Him to work every detail out that needs to be worked out in order for you to achieve that dream. And God, He will do it. Because if He called you to do it, then He's going to take care of all the details. And sometimes whenever we do completely surrender that to God has called us, we will often go through trials that will make us question as to whether we was hearing from God on that decision that we decided to make. And that was like, it was a couple of days after the this dream, after it had got started, after God had sent the right people into my life, and it started to get started. That is whenever the enemy struck. And I mean, he struck hard. He placed an illness over my body that almost took my life. And if it had not been for God, and if it had not been for my husband being home, I would have bled to death. And I'm just thankful that God was there in the middle of it. And that what the enemy meant for evil, God has used for His good. Because it has taught me about fear. And that is whenever we obey God, not to be afraid of what may turn around and strike us next. Because the enemy, he's all the time wanting to destroy us. But God, He will always see us through. God will not fail us. And God keeps His promises. And God, He cannot lie. He is a God that can be trusted. So whatever it is today that God has placed in your heart to take on, to achieve, just know that with God, you can achieve it. And that nothing is impossible with Him. And not through your strength, but because of God's faithfulness, you will achieve everything He wants you to achieve in that dream. Thank you for joining me here today, and I'll see you back here next time.